The world is watching a deeply troubling moment in global politics unfold, and Donald Trump continues to remain at the heart of it. He is once again fixated on Greenland, a vast ice-covered island that is part of NATO ally Denmark. In fact, the consequences of Trump's actions could also very well shake the very foundation of the NATO alliance. The most powerful member of NATO is openly discussing the possibility of taking territory from another NATO member. This is not just diplomatic noise. This is a direct threat to the NATO's core principle that all members stand together against outside aggression. Let's just break this down. NATO was built in 1949 to face external enemies. First, the Soviet Union, and later threats like Russia, global terrorism. It was never designed to survive a situation where one member turns on another. Article 5, which is the heart of the NATO, says an attack on one is an attack on all. But what happens when the attacker is the United States itself in a way? That question strikes at the NATO's very existence. And both Greenland and Denmark have made it clear the island is not for sale. But there is precedent here. The United States had bought what are now the US Virgin Islands, remember, from Denmark in 1917 for $25 million in gold. And in today's rates, that will be over $600 million. Denmark had initially resisted the deal, but agreed after the United States threatened force after the Second World War. Then US President had made his own offer, remember, to buy Greenland, but was rebuffed. Trump has now repeatedly refused to rule out force to seize Greenland, thereby infuriating allies Denmark and Europe.
As the Danish Prime Minister recently recalled, Greenland is not for sale. It is not for the taking. We are no longer in the era when one could buy or sell Louisiana, and therefore these intimidations must stop. And Denmark knows it can count on the solidarity of European countries, which reaffirmed this through their heads of state and government in a joint statement no later than yesterday.
It is absolutely clear that the fate of Greenland will be decided by the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark, to whose territory Greenland belongs. The principles enshrined in the UN Charter, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the inviolability of borders must be respected. All questions concerning security in the Arctic region must, of course, be discussed within the NATO framework, and that is what we are doing.
Trump arguing that Greenland is a national security necessity. And there is a strategic reality here. In 2024, it lost 2.5 million liters of fresh water per second. 2.5 million liters of fresh water per second. Melting Arctic ice is opening up new shipping routes. Greenland holds rare minerals, remember, and both Russia and China have increased their military and economic presence in the Arctic. But the strategy does not justify destabilizing your own alliance. At the same time, Donald Trump is pushing for a massive military expansion, a defense budget of $1.5 trillion by 2027. He calls it a dream military funded by tariffs and designed for what he describes as troubled and dangerous times. In fact, Washington is preparing for future great power conflicts with Beijing, Moscow, and beyond, reportedly. But in doing so, it may be unraveling the very alliance that has actually kept Europe stable for decades. Regarded as the world's largest security alliance, NATO is already strained by the war in Ukraine. Allies are struggling to maintain unity, be it supplying Kiev or a plan for Europe's long-term security for that matter. A confrontation over Greenland would divert attention, divide allies, and also undermine trust. Very important. Experts are warning that NATO's credibility in itself is at stake. When a leading member undermines another or tries to undermine another, it sends out a clear message to the world that the alliance is fracturing from within. And if the NATO were to weaken or collapse, there is one man who would celebrate the loudest, of course, the Russian president. Moscow for years has dreamt of a divided West. NATO has been the single greatest obstacle to Russian expansion and power. A broken NATO would basically hand the Kremlin a historic strategic victory without a single shot fired. Imagine that. China, of course, would also take note. And this is what is happening in Greenland. And this is why it matters. To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.